Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, remember in college when you'd have like a big term paper due or like a big exam, and it was like, yeah, I mean, that's not till like next week. I don't need to get to that yet. I got time. I can go hang out. I can, play NCAA 2000 and maybe go out, have a nice night out, whatever. Like we'll get to the paper next week when the paper's due. Tony, it feels like a bunch of Ohio State football players have decided to treat the transfer portal deadline much the same way I treated term papers in college.
Well, if you are an Ohio State football player, you get first dibs on all kinds of class schedules, so you don't need to be first at anything. You can take your time and do stuff, and you'll just get right in whatever classes you want. But certainly, with hours to go, the latest Buckeye to jump in, Kyion Grayes, redshirt freshman wide receiver, redshirt sophomore wide receiver, redshirt freshman wide receiver. I'm sorry. It's Tom. Been a long day. I've put some new people on notifications in terms of notify me when they tweet because of the transfer portal today, and it's just been constant. But Kyion Grayes, Arizona prospect, I think the number 88 player in the 2022 class, on his way into the portal, and not a surprise. Missed last year, was injured for most of the year. 1 catch for 2 yards in his career. So we see this, and certainly no surprise.
No, I think that the biggest surprise is the timing of all of this, where the portal window has been open since right after the spring game. I think it opened the Tuesday after the spring game or something like that. And you figured, okay, a day or two, and then, boy, you're going to have 5 or 6 guys in there probably after the spring. And then you had Dallin Hayden, who we knew before the spring game, and then you had Cedric Hawkins right after, and then it was just kind of radio silence for quite a while. And now 3 today on the last day of the portal window. Grayes leaving again. I feel like we say this on pretty much all of these shows because all of these guys there has not been a boy, I can't believe that guy transfer yet this portal window for Ohio State. It's been a lot of the guys who, hey, you've been there 2 years, you've been there 3 years. Doesn't feel like you're making appreciable progress up the depth chart. Feels like maybe some of the younger guys, have surpassed you on the depth chart. Not a real clear path to the playing field. This is what the transfer portal is meant to be. These are some of the guys who 10 years ago would have been kind of stuck, and you feel like, well, I don't want to transfer because then I have to sit out a year. Now that you have the instant eligibility that avoids that problem. And you can step in, you hop in the portal, go find another place, and you have you can continue your career where you're going to be near the top of the depth chart. And let's be real clear, Kyion Grayes is going to go in the portal, and Kyion Grayes is going to have some options, and he's going to have some attractive Power 5 options, I would certainly think. He's someone who, if you told me Kyion Grayes has 400, 500 yards receiving this year in wherever he ends up, I wouldn't be shocked by that.
No, certainly not. And he's a guy that, as a high school recruit, as a prospect, really, really reminded me a lot of Chris Olave because they play the same position. They're Z receivers. They can get open deep. They can do stuff after the catch. He just never really had a chance at Ohio State. The injury last year derailed pretty much everything. He's now the 3rd member of that 2022 receiving class to hit the portal, and it's Caleb Brown and Caleb Burton were the first 2, and then of course Kyion Grayes, and so that leaves them. That entire class has left the Ohio State receiving room a bit thin, and Ryan Day admitted as such this spring when he said there is truth to the fact that they are thin at receiver. And I wrote about that with using one of his quotes about it. Like, yeah, we're thin or something to that effect. And I got somebody on Twitter is like, oh, what clickbait? We're not thin. Like, just go look at the numbers. There are now 7 scholarship receivers at Ohio State. It wasn't that long ago when they were running 6 guys in a rotation. Now you've got 7 scholarship guys in the building. They'll have 2 more coming in, but just 7 right now. And you can't rely too much on incoming freshmen. Generally, they've got 1 this year that they can rely on, but it's not something you can make a habit out of.
No, definitely not. If you just assume, well, everyone's going to perform like J.J. Smith, like, well, that's offer not valid for anyone not named J.J. Smith generally. Even you go back to Chris Olave, you mentioned earlier, like Chris Olave, we talked to him around Halloween, I think. And even when we talked to him then, everyone was kind of like, why are we talking to Chris Olave? And then you saw it immediately, after that, started to have a little bit of a breakout in November. Garrett Wilson was a little earlier than that, but he was really, you saw him kind of in garbage time early, and then you saw him more in like October and November of his freshman year. That's, especially for someone like Mylan Graham, for example, who comes in with that same 5-star pedigree, coming in the summer, he's not, I don't want to break anyone's heart here, but he's not starting day 1 at Ohio State if he's coming in the summer, no matter how good he is. So when are you going to be able to rely on him? Demarion Witten is the other guy, in case you're wondering, because he's listed as a tight end on a lot of the recruiting services, but he is going to kind of come in and start as a wide receiver. So we'll see where he fits into that whole mix. But yeah, being at 7, you got to remember, Brandon Inniss missed the spring game. He was in a boot for the spring game. Now, I don't think there's any indication that that's going to linger into the season, but you get 1 guy hurt and then you're down to 6. And if you're not planning on playing those true freshmen day 1, and I don't think you can outside of J.J. Smith, well, then you are getting thin. And this is, I think, also maybe, Tony, a challenging place for them to bring someone in, because who are you going to bring in as a wide receiver? Someone's going to want to come in and play. Well, you have Emeka Egbuka, you've got Brandon Inniss, you've got Carnell Tate, you've got Jeremiah Smith. I mean, you've got Jaden Ballard. You've got a talented room. It's going to be a challenge for someone to come in and be something more than the 4th or 5th receiver there. I don't know how many guys you're going to be able to attract to come and play in that room. Listen, far be it for me to sell Brian Hartline short and being able to attract talent to Ohio State. That seems like it might be a tough sale. Maybe he can do it. He is Brian Hartline. He has sold plenty of ketchup popsicles to ladies in white gloves over the years. So you never count him out. But that does not feel like it's going to be an easy spot for them to just grab someone, grab some other, former top 50 receiver out of the portal.
Yeah, unless Noah Rogers comes back. It worked with Bryson Rogers, but Bryson Rogers didn't go anywhere. But it is not a deep group necessarily. But Kyion Grayes, the position he plays is deep, because he had Jeremiah Smith, and I'm going to put him at Z. Jeremiah Smith, Jaden Ballard were both there. Jaden Ballard gets the start in the spring game, but Jeremiah Smith was with the 1s and 2s throughout, and Kyion Grayes could never get to that point. And you're adding Mylan Graham in that role as well. And who knows how much Bryson Rogers is playing in that, because they want him to play. And right now he's probably the 3rd slot guy, and you're going to be moving some guys around. So this really made a lot of sense for Kyion Grayes to head out. And like you said, he'll find somewhere. Won't be a surprise to see him play. Caleb Brown got a little bit of time with Iowa last year. I don't know that Caleb Burton really did much at his current stop. But you spend enough time at Ohio State, you're going to pick some things up, and I'm sure that he did. And now he'll head off, and we'll see if they look at anybody in the portal. They had looked at a couple of guys early on and really didn't explore that. You look at this group, and I don't know what to expect from Demarion Witten at this point this season. And same with Mylan Graham. You come in June, it's a rare guy that's going to really do something that is that takes snaps away from somebody, where they get into a rotation. So really, I think what you're looking at, assuming nobody else leaves, and surprisingly, a very good comment from Kevin Noon as we're talking on the show, and he texts, "Hey, don't forget, sometimes it could take a couple of days for all of the paperwork to get through. So just because maybe you don't see any news tonight doesn't mean that somebody isn't going in." So kudos to Kevin first time for everything. But, if you're operating with 6 or 7 guys this season, that's a low number. But again, who are you going to bring in? And we've talked about David Adolph before, the walk-on, they like that. It's just, it seems silly to say it's a concerning thing, but it's a little concerning.
Yeah, Brian Hartline feels like he's got a 6-car garage, and he's got 6 like real fancy sports cars in all 6 of those bays. But it's like, boy, the eastern wing of the garage where you have bays 8 through 12. Like, boy, you'd like to have cars in there too, and it so this is these are rich person problems. And those are the problems that Brian Hartline generally has in that wide receiver room. It's like, well, we only have, 5 former top 50 national players. So, these are problems that a lot of programs would kill to have. But I think within the context of the 2024 season, and where you might play 16, 17 games, as we feel like we talk about every 3 shows or so, you're going to be putting that depth to the test. And if they don't add people through the portal, I do think you're going to see some of those wide receivers, some of those walk-ons, David Adolph getting some run. We saw a bunch from him this spring. I know Brennan Schramm had a touchdown during the spring game. You maybe see him. You see Jupe Mitchell we've seen on special teams, and maybe he's more of a player in the rotation. Generally, we're talking about filling the second half of the Akron game and filling the second half of whatever Rutgers game or whatever those types of games we're talking about. You just have to not have your players playing, your top players playing 50, 60 snaps a game in games where they don't have to do that. Because, there are going to be games where they have to do it, but you don't want to have that be an every game thing. So, there are potential solutions on the roster. There are potential solutions in the transfer portal. It's not impossible. It's going to be probably a little bit of a tough sale, but we'll see if they can do that. But there are certainly options out there, and never bet against Brian Hartline. If I told you Mylan Graham was ready to step in and be at least a rotational player for Ohio State by October 20th or something like that, tell me I'm crazy. Tell me no, that will definitely not happen.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. And as I've said before, watching Demarion Witten, watching that Glenville team against Dinwiddie of Virginia last year, it was the most dominating and effective performance I've seen by one high school player. I think Glenville was down like 13-0 or 7-0 in the first quarter. Witten didn't play. Plays in the second quarter, they score like 36 points. And Dinwiddie had no answer for him, and he just dominated. So that's the kind of guy that I'm saying, it was an incredible performance. So, he's a big guy, 6'4", 210, something like that. Marlon Graham, go watch his junior highlights. You're going to say, how are you keeping that guy off the field? So there are some things there. There are certainly some promising players coming in. I wouldn't also be surprised if from one snap, you're going out there with 3 receivers, one guy runs a long route, you take him off the field, and you throw in a second running back. You throw in a second tight end, and you go from 11 to 12 or 11 to 21. And that's a way that you keep from wearing out a thin-ish receiver room when, hey, you play a couple of running backs, or, they obviously love 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, assuming they can find those 2 tight ends. And I also think you could see G. Scott playing some in the slot as that kind of flex tight end, because that's kind of, what you see when you look at him, and maybe he can be effective there. But I have a feeling they'll be okay. And again, we weren't expecting Kyion Grayes to play much this season, but could have been a guy that was in the fourth quarter. Now, who is that guy in the fourth quarter? That sort of thing. That's kind of what we're talking about. Who is going to be that person now? Because you don't want it to be Carnell Tate. You don't want it to be Jeremiah Smith. You don't want it to be, it's not going to be Emeka Egbuka in those kinds of games. So it'll have to be somebody. But anything else, Tom, before we go?
Nope, I think we've covered it. Let's get that posted, and then we've got 3 hours till the deadline, and then potentially more if people are delayed in announcing their announcements. So we'll we'll see if this is the last transfer portal announcement of the spring or not.
And I just refreshed Twitter to see if anybody new had popped in. Nobody has. I'm sure they will once we wrap up. So want to thank you all for tuning in. And reminder, we are running a spring sale at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can become a member for a very low price. A discount there for the spring, running it for I don't know exactly how many days, but now's your opportunity to get behind the paywall for a lower price and check it out and see how things are going. An annual subscription. So let me just hit Twitter one more time. Okay, not an Ohio State player. It is a Buffalo punter. So still important, but that will wrap it up, and we will talk to you guys later.